the fact that it's a diagonal through her property creates some unique challenges.
Now I'm tracking. Go ahead. Limit your question to that, please.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, having it be a diagonal would definitely cause problems. My tenant has said he would not want to farm. It would cut off about half of the farm from being farmed because of the pipeline route being a diagonal. It would also do a lot more damage to the tile lines, and a lot of those lines are old, and it wouldn't surprise me if the clay would just crumble from those tiles going at a diagonal. And that's why I said that I told them that probably the only way I would consider a voluntary easement was if they would put it on the west, along the west fence line, because that would minimize the, I won't say miles, but it would minimize the distance on the property. It would minimize damage to the tile, and it wouldn't go through that wet spot, which doesn't dry out easily already. And it would give me the option of using that land for CRP instead of just letting it sit there without being farmed.
And so what was Summit's response to that suggestion?
And this is another lie that a Summit agent told me. He said, "Oh no, ma'am, we cannot move the route of the pipeline because we've already submitted that route to the IUB, and the IUB will not let us move the route of the pipeline once we've submitted it to them." This was still in 2021.
Okay, so fairly early on.
Fairly early on. And until I started listening to these hearings, I was not really aware that I wasn't told the truth.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Colas.
Good morning, Mrs. Burkgren. I just have a couple of questions. First of all, I want to congratulate you on all the time and effort and investigation that you've put into your presentation before the board, as you are a non-represented landowner by legal counsel. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's been hundreds of hours of stress and research, and during a time when I didn't really have hundreds of hours to devote to it.
Again, thank you very much. I do have a question for clarification on your testimony. You indicated that 78% of Iowans were opposed to the project. Did you in fact mean that 78% of Iowans were opposed to eminent domain being used for the project?
I do not know how the original question from the Iowa poll was worded. So, based on just talking to friends and neighbors about the project, I would say the main concern initially was the use of eminent domain. However, as more and more information is coming out about safety, I would say that concern has shifted so that they're also concerned about the pipeline itself and the diversion. I had one friend express concern earlier this week about the diversion of what could be a valuable asset of CO2 to just burying it in the ground.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? I see. Mr. Jorde?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I thought I couldn't see Ms. Hike back there. I thought she had a question. Just a couple, ma'am, on exhibit number 1, those are some questions that you posed to your tenant. Is that correct?
That's correct. I
And-
was trying to prepare for testimony today.
And I just want to clarify, even though these are the tenant's answers back to you, are you personally adopting these answers as your own?
Yes,
All
I
right.
am.
And then on exhibit number 11, the email exchange from with your insurance carrier,
Yes,
it appears that you, for privacy purposes, have removed certain portions of the email address and the from and to in both of the emails. Is that correct?
actually, my insurance agent redacted that information for privacy concerns.
Okay, very good. So but to be clear, you didn't alter in any way the contents of the emails, and these are true and accurate copies of the email response you received from your agent, correct?
Yes, it is. And if you want to go to the insurance agent, she works for Knapp, Tedesco, and Ames.
No, that's fine. I believe you. I just want to button up the record on that.
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you.
You had mentioned that your son and your tenant couldn't testify. To your knowledge, did they attempt to testify in these matters?
They did not because I was told that they couldn't when I called the IUB.
Okay, that only the directly affected Exhibit H landowner could testify?
Yes,
All right.
and that's why my husband isn't here to testify. I'm doing it for the both of us.
Okay. About the valuation in the land, would you purchase a piece of property if it had a CO2 pipeline located on it?
Absolutely not. I would not purchase land that had a CO2 pipeline. I've learned far too much about safety concerns. I have an in-house expert in my son who can tell me error rates of flow meters and how quickly that CO2 can come out of a pipeline. I know what it would do to the soil, so I'd be buying land that somebody might try to price at a regular price, but I'd know that the land would not produce as much after a pipeline had gone through. And I would not want to take on the liability of having land with a pipeline on it.
If you were to have to sell your land at any point, would you fault bidders for bidding less for your land should this pipeline be located on it?
I could not fault somebody for doing exactly what I would do in a similar situation.
If the IUB had told you or had allowed your son, who's clearly an expert in his field, to testify, would he have testified?
He would love to be here today.
All right.
And he could go into much more detail. He knows all about computer modeling and different forms of computer modeling, and he could supply you with a lot more information about dispersion rates than I can. He told me last night before I went to bed, and maybe he did put this in there, but he didn't like using the term because it wasn't an engineering term, but the kill zone would be up to 1.4 miles from the pipeline. And for engineering terms, they use a finite border. But he said in real life terms, there would be a gradual reduction rather than a finite border. And I'll look through just to make sure he didn't give me that information here.
Well, while you're doing that, ma'am, do you believe that you were prevented from putting on the case here that you wanted to because your son, who's an expert, was unable to testify and provide a full opinion as to his views on this project?
Yes, I wish he had been able to testify. I think all of us could have learned a lot from him and from his expertise.
And is it true that Summit has not provided you or your son or anyone that you're aware of their plume modeling or dispersion analysis or inputs utilized to get to a quote-unquote worst-case rupture?
To my knowledge, they have not. He had to base his calculations on questions that were answered by the boss of the land agent that's been contacting me recently. She very kindly provided me with some information about the volume of CO2 and the pressure of the CO2. And he made a specific point to me, and I think it's in his testimony, that CO2 is not a liquid. It is a supercritical, I'm not sure if it's called a supercritical fluid or mass or whatever, but anyway, it's a supercritical state, and under that definition should not even be considered under 479B, because it doesn't fall into that category, because it is, there's a difference in CO2 if it's compressible or not compressible. Sorry,
Oh, that's
I should have memorized this.
No, it's fine. It's in there, so we don't
Okay.
have to go through it.
Okay,
And have you been compensated? Well, actually, let me ask you this: for the 1.4 mile kill zone that your son, expert modeler, prepared, you said that he utilized inputs that Summit actually provided to you, and you shared directly to him.
Objection, Your Honor.
State the objection.
This goes well beyond questions about this witness's specific parcel and into, I guess, computational, expert type evidence that's far afield of the purpose of this session.
Mr. Jorde, do you have a question about the parcel or the siting or potential easement?
Yeah. Does the fact that the kill zone is 1.4 miles from where this pipeline is potentially located on your property concern you?
yes. As I stated before, we have land in Story County that drains into Ada Hayden Lake, and we made decisions to protect people in the city of Ames with fresh water because we are not farming that parcel that drains into the lake. I view the pipeline and the farmland in a similar way, that if the pipeline is dangerous, it's not just dangerous to me, it's dangerous to the other people living in the vicinity, specifically the family that lives on the acreage. It's dangerous to people driving on Highway 169, which goes on the east edge of our property. And so, as a citizen, as a person who tries to do good, I don't want to put something on my property. So I wanted to know from my son, how far would it go? I know that the Summit told us early on, or maybe I've read it in the IUB, it's been so long ago I don't remember, that a pipeline had to be at least 500 feet from an inhabited house, from people. I don't think that applies to livestock. So I wanted to know, is 500 feet enough? And I asked my son, is 500 feet enough? And he said no.
And ma'am, have you been compensated, or has Summit offered to compensate you for the economic detriment of the hundreds of hours you've had to spend educating yourself on this matter due to information that they did not provide you?
They have not offered to compensate me for my time, for my stress. No, they have not.
And you mentioned the words that they had lied to you, bullied you, patronized you, and ambushed you. Is it your opinion that none of those things are in the public convenience and necessity?
None of what Summit has proposed is for public convenience or public necessity, mine or anyone else's.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Okay, with no other questions from the parties, we appreciate you coming and testifying today. We will break for an hour, so we will be back at 1:20, and I believe we will be starting with Bob Van Diest.
May I make one short comment?
If the comment is related specifically to the siting of the property and hasn't already been covered by questions, testimony, or previous exhibits, that would be appropriate.
I'll let you decide. You can stop me if you want to.
I don't want to stop anyone.
I know. And I appreciate that you've given me the opportunity to speak. When I first started this project, someone told me, you're not going to get very far, the fix is in. And I'm here to ask you, as the representatives of the Iowa Utilities Board, to prove him wrong. So I can say, I told you so. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we will be back at shortly before 1:30, and we will be starting with Bob Van Diest.